And so, Cathy, I want to, open our conversation around what you're seeing from your perspective. Is this a bit of a turning point for gender lens investing in Australia? How are you seeing it?
Thanks so much, Sandy, and thanks for those introductory remarks. I think it's probably fair to say Australia's been slower to the GLI party than lots of other markets. And I'm not sure we're at a sort of tipping point, but I definitely feel and Australians Investing in Women is observing momentum building. And I think there's a few different drivers for that. One is we have more significant investors in Australia leading the charge. So family offices like the Alberts and foundations as well with significant endowments like Minderoo and Snow are looking at a gender lens approach to their investing. Another driver, and it's in a way an anticipated driver, I think, which is the growth in women's wealth, both self-made and inherited. Many of you will have heard the figure around the great wealth transfer in Australia over the next 10 years, $5 trillion expected. 65% of that is expected to be within the hands of women. And there has been research from wealth managers and others that suggest women wish to align their investments with their values and support positive social outcomes. And really gender equality is often a specific driver, but it falls within that general remit of social outcomes being one of the reasons people might choose to apply a gender lens. I think we're also seeing growth in the ecosystem and more around gender lens investing and more collaboration in that ecosystem, which is really exciting. And there are many initiatives, but things like Equity Clear that have come from the startup space and are focusing on data transparency as a way to drive more investment towards women founders. The DEAR network that's mobilising high net worth women investors to build investment confidence and drive impact, and gender is very much part of that. And then there's the organisation that I chair, and people who do know Australians Investing in Women will know that our focus for the last 15 years has been on philanthropic giving and promoting gender equality through philanthropy. And the driver is largely around fairness, you referred to that, but also around prosperity and the belief backed by research that if you have a more gender equal world, it's a more prosperous world for everybody. And there's really compelling economic data around that. Deloitte did some research a number of years ago that we were part of supporting that estimated that if we were to achieve gender equality in Australia, we would add 128 billion to Australia's economy every year. Lots of people would know McKinsey's research from some years previously that was, I think its goal is to reach gender equality by 2025. Unfortunately, we're not there, but it was talking about trillions being added to the global economy if we had a more gender equal world. So for Australians Investing in Women, the mandate had been philanthropy, but our new strategy absolutely centres investment as well in our work, because if we're serious about accelerating gender equality, which we are, we want to engage with much larger pools of capital. And we see our role in this space is more around field building. And we have, with a number of partners, which is really exciting because it's very collaborative across the ecosystem, initiated a new cross-sector platform called the Gender Lens Investing Collaborative. And I know we've got some members of it here today, but we're bringing together lots of players in the ecosystem. So asset owners, allocators, fund managers, ecosystem partners, with the aim of accelerating the adoption of gender lens investing in Australia. And we're doing it by building a community that is around convening, learning and collaboration, supporting innovation in investment approaches and helping to influence the broader ecosystem and the policy environment. And all those players I've mentioned and many more are really collaborating a lot more. And I think you'll see it, people going to the Impact Investment Summit, there is going to be a pre-conference day dedicated to gender lens investing and a number of gender lens investing sessions throughout the main conference. And there's always been an element of gender, but it's really embedded this year. And that's thanks to lots of that collaboration of many of the players I've mentioned so far. I think we're seeing stronger pipeline. Not like a flood, but pipeline. And that's often been seen as a barrier. And we're going to hear all about that with the panel. So I won't focus on that too much for now, but across asset classes and markets, which is exciting. And these are all drivers. You mentioned the data piece, Sandy, and standards and the importance of that. And I think technology is a challenge around gender, but it's also an enabler if used responsibly and drives better data, better accountability, a whole range of access to finance, a whole range of exciting things. So that's driving, I think, momentum. So overall, I'd say I don't think we're at a tipping point. I think we're approaching it, but we're not there yet. I think we would really like to see more capital flowing, but there's definitely maturing of the ecosystem. Investment case is clearer. You said it yourself, but yeah, just need to see more money flowing to the opportunities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it is fantastic that the summit is setting up a specific gender stream this year, and that GLI collaborative that you mentioned. I don't know if there are any opportunities, Cathy, that you'd like to share that you are seeing coming into the market, or things that are exciting from your view. I know, I was thrilled to see the orange bond moving with strength to strength, both in the local and the global space. Of course, we have our speakers today. If there's anything else that piques your interest that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I just on the orange bond, I think that, that's very much in that with that lens of what are we missing in terms of opportunities if we don't apply a gender lens, and that kind of missing middle in particularly in the global south, the majority world of small and medium-sized enterprises is a really interesting space where there is lots of opportunity. And I think the orange movement is evolving beyond bonds and now moving towards setting up a multi-platform debt fund, which we'll hear more about over the course of the next 12 months. Australia will be able to invest in that fund, but we look like we will also be part of the market, which is exciting. And a similar opportunity like that, I think, in that sort of, again, with that, that sort of the middle being missed along the way in the Australian market, is women-led enterprises that are often profitable, but they sort of fall somewhere between that venture and even impact space. So it might be in consumer health services. And there are more and more funds like F5 and others that are looking at ways to provide the right kind of capital to those kind of women-led businesses, really with a thesis that is all about enriching those founders is also a way of kind of generating further wealth, and it will have a trickle on effect, and those founders will also continue to invest in women, and we see that often in startup founders. But the one other one I would like to mention, and I mention it because I watched I don't know if other people did, but we watched the Matildas last night, and with my husband, who is a sport fanatic, and I can tell you now that 5-10 years ago, I don't think I would have seen my husband behaving that way, watching women's sport, the way he was last night, the excitement, the thrill of it. And there is so much opportunity. It's a really good example of a sector that's been completely overlooked and underestimated and underinvested in as a result. And there is a shift that we're seeing in that, individual high net worth individuals are investing in teams, but there are also funds emerging in the United States. Ariel Investments has released a fund, the $250 million US fund that will invest in women's sports, not just teams and leagues, but everything that sits around it. All the the specialized equipment, specialized uniforms. I think that's a really good example of where it's taken a long time, but the momentum's really there around that opportunity.
Thank you for bringing that to light. I don't think many would have the sort of view and visibility of that. Just before I introduce our panelists, are there any recommendations that you want to offer for participants as they engage with gender lens investments, or requests that you'd like to make of our managers and investment community here today?
Not so much, requests. I would encourage everybody to join our collaborative, of course, because I think we've got a much better chance of this market growing if we do it together and learn together and collaborate and share. It's also a great opportunity then to get to see best practice in action and really look for that. There is really, you talked about people embedding across the whole spectrum of the way they invest, from portfolio construction, due diligence, that is happening. And there are also really strategic approaches being taken to gender lens investing. I mentioned somebody like Dr. Ruth Shaber, who's been an investor in this space for a really long time, but is really drilling down on fund managers as the key and looking to female and other diverse fund managers, because her thesis is if you put money into the hands of those fund managers, they will see opportunities that people who, men or those who are not gender diverse or otherwise diverse just wouldn't see. And that's a way to really shift capital. So look for those really strategic players out there who've been at it a long time and are evolving their practice.
Thank you so much, Cathy. And I really appreciate that gender lens investing isn't just one thing, and that it can look a little bit different in its representation and fund managers. And we have to sort of dive deep in the ecosystem to understand how those strategies are playing out.